Hey everybody, my name is Dr. Scott Giacomucci. I'm the author of Trauma-Informed Principles in Group Therapy, Psychodrama, and Organizations, Action Methods for Leadership. And today I want to talk to you a bit about Chapter 6 in this book, which is focused on the second of the 6 Trauma-Informed Principles. Chapter 6 is titled Trustworthiness and Transparency in Group Therapy, Psychodrama, and Leadership. So this video is going to outline content from Chapter 6, really talking about the importance of trustworthiness and transparency within organizations, within supervision, as trauma-informed leaders, in psychodrama, and in group psychotherapy in general. Now, of course, this is focused just on the second of the 6 trauma-informed principles outlined by SAMHSA, and it's important to note that these 6 principles really go together. We can't fully cultivate trustworthiness and transparency without also addressing the other 5 trauma-informed principles. So I encourage you to check out some of the other videos on this channel to learn more about the other trauma-informed principles as they relate to trauma recovery, as they relate to group therapy, to psychodrama practice, and to leadership and organizations. Now, trauma and PTSD at their fundamental level really rupture a sense of trust within the self, within others and relationships, and within the world. When we experience trauma, it so often takes place within relationships, and it can be in the form of betrayal or abandonment, or neglect, or violence, or abuse, or harm. And it leads to difficulty trusting others and feeling safe with others. Other types of trauma, like natural disasters or other tragedies, might leave our trust in humanity or our trust just in the world shook and shaken. Trauma really can disrupt our sense of trust in others in the world, whereas PTSD really can disrupt our sense of self, our sense of trust in ourselves. PTSD and trauma can really disrupt our sense of trust in ourselves. In the aftermath of trauma, while experiencing traumatic stress, it's pretty common to struggle to know what's real and what's not real, to almost lose a sense of trust in our own body. Is our body our sense? Can we trust our senses? Is what we're seeing, what we're feeling, what we're sensing, is it related to what's happening here and now? Or is it being triggered and related to that past trauma that we experienced? Can we even trust our thoughts in our decision making in the aftermath of trauma? I mean, PTSD by its nature leaves us with negative moods and feelings and negative and distorted beliefs about ourselves, others, and the world. So at its core, trauma and PTSD involve a rupture of trust in ourselves, trust in others, and trust in the world. I think collective traumas also disrupt our sense of trust in humanity, or a sense of trust in the goodness of others. Judith Herman, who's wrote the book Trauma and Recovery and is one of the pioneers and most famous trauma experts, she describes trust as a foundational belief in the continuity of life, a sense of safety in the world, and a formative core element sustaining one throughout their life. So on that existential level, we can see how trauma can really disrupt this foundational belief in the continuity of life, a sense of safety in the world, and this core element sustaining us throughout our life. If we experience trauma and come to believe that the world's not a safe place, that we're constantly hyper aroused about the fragility of life and our own death or the death of people around us, and we lose this trust that life will go on, we lose this trust in the continuity of life, we lose the trust in the safety and goodness of the world, the benefits of living, of having relationships, it really can be paralyzing and debilitating. Trust is really at the basis of all relationships and at the basis of all spirituality and faith. In moments of terror or trauma, as humans, we'll naturally cry out for those that we most trust. Usually, these are our caregivers, our parents, our partners, or God. And in the moment of trauma, if this cry for help or comfort goes unanswered, trauma survivors' basic sense of trust and faith in the world and in others can be completely destroyed. Judith Herman says, when trust is lost, traumatized people feel that they belong more to the dead than to the living. A loss of trust in the world, loss of trust in relationships, and trust in oneself, in our own senses, are really core to trauma and PTSD. Again, so much of trauma happens because of other human beings betraying our trust in them, or simply because of other human beings in general, which can make it really hard to trust other human beings in the future, to feel safe in relationships. This is especially true for complex trauma and complex PTSD. Trust is really foundational in the healing process and must be earned by the professional. It's not something that trauma survivor is just going to come into therapy, come into treatment, and automatically trust us because we're professionals. It's really going to be something we're going to have to work for and demonstrate our trustworthiness. So it makes sense, considering how foundational trust is, that SAMHSA would elevate trust and transparency as the second of the 6 trauma-informed principles. Now, as professionals, when we look at this second trauma-informed principle, we need to remember that trust goes both ways. It's really a reciprocal and a relational experience. That, of course, we need to work at developing trust, gaining the trust of our clients in order to best help them. But it might also mean that we have to show our clients that we trust them, that we trust in their ability to heal, that we trust in their ability to choose what's best for them, that we trust in their ability to join us or to allow us to join them in this difficult work, that we trust that they, at their core, know what they need and what's best for them. And this can be tough. I mean, there's real limitations to trusting clients depending on our work setting and the types of clinical issues we're working. But research really confirms this, that we have to offer trust to our clients if we expect them to trust us. Mistrust is only going to breed more mistrust. Our clients will sense our mistrust in them, and they're unlikely to feel safe or seen, or even to want to be in relationship with us or to share difficult things with us if they feel that we don't trust them. We have to really trust our clients as collaborators in the trauma recovery process. And again, that trust that the client is the expert in their experience. Carl Rogers, who is a famous counselor, highlighted the importance of trust in psychotherapy, suggesting that the therapist should specifically trust in the unrealized potential of the client. So this means that we trust that there's potential for healing, for growth, for learning within any client that comes in front of us. And I think this is really foundational to believing in the goodness of people and believing in their ability to heal. Always a fan of the humanistic counseling and psychology tradition in Carl Rogers. Again, there's going to be limits to our ability to trust our clients entirely, but perhaps we can still trust in their ability to heal, even if we're working with a client that's demonstrated dishonesty or has lied to us, or engages in other behaviors that suggest they might not be entirely trustworthy. Even then, we can still trust in the unrealized potential within them. Clients are really going to feel it when we trust them. And we're going to demonstrate it non-verbally in the types of suggestions that we offer to them, in our responses to them, in our voice tone, in our hesitation in our responses, and in the way that we structure our sessions and our groups if we're doing group therapy. When we use different group structures like smaller groups or sociometry, it really demonstrates our inherent trust in the group to show up and support each other as peers, in that we're positioning group members as agents of change for each other. We're positioning them in smaller groups to support each other, to be therapeutic agents for each other. We also demonstrate our trust in clients when we believe in their ability to find their own way, to heal themselves with the right support, to ask for help when they need it, and to bounce back from tragedy and work towards achieving their goals. So it's important for us as professionals to consider, how do our clients know that we believe in them and trust them? Do they really know that? And are there ways that we can more explicitly or indirectly convey our trust in our clients? And how do we actively safeguard and cherish the trust that clients extend to us as professionals? I mean, it's a real honor and privilege when someone that's experienced trauma and betrayal and struggles to trust others begins to trust us. And it's something that we have to protect and honor and really recognize as a huge step in the process. Now, this second trauma-informed principle, trustworthiness and transparency, is also really important in organizations, in leadership. It's important for supervisors, for educators. And there's going to be parallel processes that emerge in how we're demonstrating or not demonstrating trustworthiness and transparency between the leaders of an agency and their staff, and between the staff and the clients. That if the leadership are demonstrating transparency and trustworthiness with the staff, it's going to be a lot easier and more likely that the staff are going to demonstrate trustworthiness and transparency with the clients that they're working with. Staff who feel trusted by their leaders are more likely to experience success than staff who don't feel trusted by their leaders. Sandy Bloom writes that the erosion of trust in the workplace has become a major barrier to instituting trauma-informed care. I mean, there's a real foundational aspect of trust in an organization between leadership and the staff. If the staff don't feel like they can trust their leaders, they're going to leave the organization. They're going to be disgruntled. They're not going to want to follow policies. They're not going to respect the leadership. Without trust, we lose our sense of safety. We lose peer support and mutuality. We lose the ability to collaborate, to feel empowered, and to celebrate diversity and identity. Trust is so important in workplaces and organizations. Now, trustworthiness and transparency go hand in hand, and they have a reciprocal relationship in that they feed each other. And this is confirmed by research in various fields of business, that when an organization and a leader demonstrates transparency, it directly increases the trust that the public, staff, and customers have in that organization. So a simple way to develop more trust is to practice transparency. And this applies for therapists, for supervisors, for educators, for leaders, for any professional. For staff are more likely to follow a leader that they trust. There was a meta-analysis they did on trust and supervision. Meta-analysis is essentially the highest level of research. It's where they take all the research studies, quantitative research studies, on a given area within 10 or 20 years, and they do the fancy statistical analyses, combining all the sample sizes together so that we can see across all different populations and settings and industries, what are the trends or the statistics associated with whatever we're researching. In this case, it was about trust in supervision. And what they found in this meta-analysis was that there were three main components that workers highlighted as supporting their trust in their supervisors. So three main components. First one is about a sense of benevolence. So when a staff member feels and knows that their supervisor has their best interest in mind, has good intentions, really cares about them and cares about the work and cares about the clients and cares about the customers, that they have more trust for that supervisor. Second area is competence. So when workers feel that their supervisor is competent, is skilled, is knowledgeable, they're more likely to trust them. Makes sense. In many cases, it probably makes sense that the supervisor should be the person who's the most skilled and the most competent in the job. And the third quality is integrity. That when staff members know they can trust the integrity of their supervisor, their ethics, that they're going to say what they mean and they're going to do what they say, that they come to have more trust in their supervisor. So as leaders, as supervisors, these are three really simple things that we can actively try to cultivate in our supervisory relationships: a sense of benevolence, a sense of competence, and a sense of integrity in our work. According to research, trust in one's agency leaders promotes a sense of self-efficacy, a sense of well-being, job satisfaction, work engagement, and even reduces work-related stress and exhaustion or burnout. So workers who feel that their leaders are not trustworthy are more likely to develop resentment, fear, insecurity, and to not feel safe at work. Trauma-informed leaders are trustworthy and ethical leaders. Trauma-informed leaders are open and honest about decision-making, transparent, especially during major changes, which is really going to help promote a sense of safety and trust. If we're just implementing policies and major changes in our organization without providing some context and some background and some transparency to our staff about why we're making these changes, it's going to disrupt the sense of trust. Many times, workers and staff members don't get to see the big picture of why decisions and policies and changes are implemented in an organization. So as much as we can, hoping to illuminate and make visible the bigger picture about why changes are being made can be really helpful in promoting transparency and thus promoting trust. Withholding important positive information is also dishonest. So positive information like gratitude, admiration, respect, and even love or empathy that we have for our clients or colleagues. Sharing these positive things is another way to practice transparency and a way to cultivate trust. Of course, there's going to be limitations to how transparent we can be as leaders, as supervisors. Some personal disclosures and sharing sensitive information about an organization is just going to be inappropriate, unethical, illegal, or even a violation of confidentiality or privacy. So we can't always share everything, which can make it really tough to be a leader at times. That we have information that the staff doesn't have and can't have, and we can't share that information with the staff, but we have to make decisions influenced by that information and ensure that the new policies and changes are adhered to. It's a tough position to be in as a leader. It's also a tough position to be in as a worker when changes are being made and you're not able to receive information about why changes are being made. So it puts everybody in a tough position. I would argue that the use of transparency can also include our use of self and authenticity with emotions as leaders. Of course, as therapists, we often use ourself, and there's a whole lot written about the use of self in psychotherapy. And I would argue that this is also relevant for leaders, the use of self. This can be a really powerful tool for leaders just as it is for therapists. Many times leaders are idolized or feared or resented. And maybe this is because of so much abuse of power and authority and corruption in the past. And many trauma survivors, many of our staff members are going to be trauma survivors who have experienced abuses of power in the past. And there's going to be negative projections and transference that we're going to be the recipient of as leaders. And so many people in power end up becoming dehumanized because of these negative projections, because of these transferences, because of past trauma that people have experienced being projected onto the leader. I think this happens far more often than most people realize. And it's one of the most difficult aspects of being in a leadership role. Just by the nature of being in that role, you're going to be the target of negative projections. And so the use of self, being transparent and authentic about our emotions in a skillful way, can really help people humanize us as leaders rather than dehumanize us or project on us, and really loosen and lessen some of that burden. The use of self and transparency from leaders can help us engage on a human to human level with our team and with our community. Caring about our own internal conflict and our own emotion can help clients and staff see us as leaders and to see us as humans. Of course, as leaders, we have to be aware of our limits, and our emotions are much more effective. So, leaders who are aware of their limits and are aware of their emotions are going to be far more effective than leaders who try to hide or deny or repress their emotions and their limitations. So, emotions, sharing our feelings, sharing our emotions in helpful, appropriate ways really can help cultivate trust and relationships. Leaders who completely avoid personal disclosures, who avoid vulnerability and humility, are more likely to provoke negative projections from others and are more likely to be mistrusted by others. So I want to challenge us to pause for a moment and to consider, as a leader, how am I demonstrating transparency? How am I using myself as a leader? Who are the leaders that I admire, and how specifically do they demonstrate trustworthiness and transparency? You can always look to role models for leadership and learn from them. Next, I want to talk about the second trauma informed principle, trustworthiness and transparency, as it relates to leadership in group work and psychodrama. So, of course, as group workers, we're in a leadership role, we're leading the group. And we have to cultivate trust in our groups. We have to help clients to trust each other, to trust the process, and to trust us as facilitators. One really simple thing we can do to cultivate trust is to provide a simple outline or an overview of what the plan is for the session. This is something I push myself to do every time I teach and every time I lead a therapy group. I start off, I say, this is what the plan is for today. We're going to do this, then we're going to do that, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do that. Of course, I leave room for group choices and spontaneity within that, and I'll tell the group, at this point, maybe we're going to have a group choice, or the group's going to propose topics and choose a topic. But I clearly outline what the process is going to be and or what the content is going to be in the session. And this simple act of transparency can really help people who might be really hyper aroused or stressed about not knowing what to expect in the session, to really help them ground, to connect with some safety, and to be more trusting throughout the process. So, really simple thing to implement. Research suggests that one of the reasons clients discontinue group therapy directly related to their inability to trust the group or other members in the group. So, trustworthiness is particularly important between group members in a group. Others in the research said that the trusting bond within the group was one of the most important aspects for their safety in the group. So, group therapy research is showing that mistrust in the group decreases as the cohesion in the group increases. So, group cohesion is related to that first trauma-informed principle of safety, but also related to the second trauma-informed principle of trustworthiness. There's an author named John Allen who wrote a book called Trusting in Psychotherapy. And he says, to a great extent, Trusting and trustworthiness are relationship specific, and they must be created anew in each relationship, developed, maintained, and repaired when disrupted. The creation is interpersonal. So, this is a good reminder of how important trust is for relationships, for connection, and for group psychotherapy. So, arousal, hyperarousal, is one of the main symptoms of PTSD, which is likely to make clients more hypersensitive and aware to the actions of the leader and other people in the group. So, as leaders, we have to demonstrate that we're trustworthy, and we have to be able to repair ruptures when they occur, ruptures to trust and to the relationship. As a group leader, we also have to learn how to trust the process and to trust the group, to trust ourselves as facilitators, and to trust our training and our clinical instincts. This really requires us to engage in our own personal growth work and our own professional development. Really want to encourage you to pause here and reflect on how exactly are you continuing to engage in your own personal growth work, and how exactly are you continuing to engage in your own professional growth. So, the second trauma informed principle of trust and transparency is also really important in psychodrama specifically. And as psychodramatists in our training, we really have to learn how to trust the process in psychodrama. I think this is particularly important to psychodrama directing because there's so much spontaneity and so much co-creation that happens in a psychodrama. When I facilitate a psychodrama, I often go in the group with only a warm-up and no idea what the topic's going to be, who's going to be the protagonist, or what the roles in the psychodrama are going to be. And the whole psychodrama is spontaneously co-created with the group, with the protagonist, and with me. And so to walk into a group without any certainty on what the content is going to be and what the process is going to be exactly requires us to really trust in the method we're using and to have faith in the process. Of course, we need to trust the protagonist and to trust the group as well. In classical psychodrama, there's a popular saying to follow the protagonist. And I think this is usually a good rule of thumb, but sometimes it's limited, especially when we're working with trauma survivors, where we might get pulled into the trauma vortex sooner than the protagonist or the group is ready to. And we might have to provide some structure and some containment rather than blindly following the protagonist every single time. So instead of follow the protagonist, I've been suggesting a new motto, which is inspired by a motto in dyadic developmental psychotherapy. And this motto is follow, lead, follow the protagonist. That as psychodrama directors, we need to follow the protagonist. The psychodrama is about the group and it's about the protagonist. It's not facilitator centered, it's group centered. So we certainly have to follow the group and follow the protagonist. But we also have a responsibility to lead the group and to lead the protagonist, to keep the process safe, to provide options, to provide a container, to provide safety. So follow, lead, follow the protagonist feels like a more accurate and balanced motto for me than simply following the protagonist. As psychodramatists, we have to trust in the spontaneity and the intelligence within the group, and to trust in the tele within the relationships. Tele is a unique sociometry psychodrama concept, which is discussed in other videos on this channel. Essentially, it's the opposite of transference. It's a two-way accurate knowing and seeing and experiencing of another person. It results in synchronicity and in wholesome connections within the group, and people ending up at just the right place at the right time in the right role for the protagonist, but also for themselves. So as psychodramatists, we really have to learn how to trust the tele within the relationships in the group. We also have to learn to embrace uncertainty in the process. If we're too structured and too rigid, then we're not leaving room for spontaneity. There's a certain aspect of uncertainty that comes with facilitating psychodrama and leaving room for spontaneity. As a director in a psychodrama, we have to remember that we don't have to have all the answers. We can collectively work with the group, work with the protagonist, work with the roles in the scene to uncover answers that the protagonist is seeking. So this can take a lot of pressure off of us as directors, in that we can, when a question emerges, we can ask the protagonist, hey, I'm not sure where we need to go next as the director. Where do you feel like we need to go next? We could ask the group, hey group, where does it seem like we need to go next in order to accomplish our goal? Or we can even ask the question in surplus reality to any of the roles that are enrolled within the psychodrama scene. So, for example, if God is in the scene and somebody's playing the role of God, we could have the protagonist ask God what they need to do next. And we could even have the protagonist role reverse with God and become God and answer the question through the role of God for themselves. So we don't have to have all the answers. We can trust that the answers are within the group and can emerge from the roles. As psychodramatists, we use sociometry to cultivate a sense of trust in the group. And we can use both sociometry and psychodrama or sociodrama to cultivate transparency in the group and to deal with issues related to trust. So sociometry is really useful in that it helps illuminate some of the unseen and unknown connections, preferences, choices, identities, and experiences within the group. It helps reveal the group to itself. So sociometry is particularly useful in that regard. We can also use sociometry to explore issues related to trust within a group. For example, I could do a spectrogram related to trust. 0 to 10, how much do you struggle with trust in your relationships? And everyone would self-assess themselves. Or I could ask 0 to 10, how trusting do you feel of the group at hand here? Or how trusting do you feel of yourself? Or how much is trust relate to your goals for recovery? And we could ask various prompts within spectrograms and sociometry to explore dynamics related to trust in the group. We can also use psychodrama or sculpting or sociodrama to explore some of the origins of trust issues for clients in childhood or in relationships. And this can be a really powerful way of embodying or enacting and revisiting, undoing and redoing moments where trust was betrayed in relationships, and giving the protagonist, the client, the opportunity to heal from the ruptures of trust in their past. In many ways, trauma is an antithesis to trust. It tends to destroy one's sense of trust in others. Trauma even disrupts one's ability to trust ourselves, to trust our senses, to trust our memories. Therefore, it makes a lot of sense that SAMHSA would elevate trustworthiness and transparency as essential for trauma-informed professionals. So, as we come to the end of this video on the second trauma-informed principle, I want to just remind you that while we're talking about these principles separately, they're all really interconnected, and we can't fully develop trust and transparency if we're not also embodying and addressing the other 5 trauma-informed principles. So I would encourage you to check out some of the other videos on this channel related to trauma-informed principles, and to subscribe to our channel if you want to get notifications about future videos. Leave us a comment on the video. Tell us what you learned. Tell us what you felt like was most important in this video. Or let us know if you feel like we forgot to mention something important about trust. We're really interested to hear from you. I hope you find this video helpful in your work, and look forward to seeing you in the future.